Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what is CSS. So CSS is a cascading style sheet. So these are styles that apply to a set of formatted attributes. So you can apply styles to your text. For example, you can make it bold, you can change the size, you can change the font, you can even change the spacing in your paragraph, and you can apply it to other elements on your page. It's actually a collection of styles that can be applied to one or many pages, and this will help to create a consistent look across your site. So what CSS actually is it separates content from style. So you can use different style sheets to redefine your content. So it's very important to utilize CSS styles, or you won't be able to design your page and you won't be able to create any styles within your page. So we're going to talk a little bit about external styles, inline styles, and internal styles. So we talked a little bit about this already in my first class. So the very first one is an external style sheet, which is exactly what it is. It's a style sheet that you can attach to your file. You can open it up in Dreamweaver and you can actually see all the styles that are on the style sheet. So you can see right here, if you go into CSS Designer, and I selected attach existing style sheet, and this one happens to be main.css. You can also create a style sheet within Dreamweaver, as I had showed you in a previous class. You just select create a new CSS file. I suggest that you make a folder for all your style sheets. It just makes everything nice and neat by creating folders for your images, photos for your video, and photos for your style sheet. So with an external style sheet, you can change the look of an entire website by changing just one file. In other words, if you attach an external style sheet to all your pages and you decided that you didn't like the font that you had, or you didn't like the color, or you didn't like the size, or didn't like the line length, you can actually just change it on the style sheet, and all your pages, if you attach the style sheet, all your pages will automatically change. If you have 100 pages in your site, this will save you many hours of work. So this is why it's very important to utilize an external style sheet. So inline styles are those styles that are with the HTML tag. So an inline style loses many of the advantages of a style sheet by mixing content with presentation. So you want to use this sparingly. Use inline styles for exceptional format that you're going to use only once in a page. An example of this might be your divs. So you only want to use this in extreme cases. So it actually lives inside the HTML tag, and it applies to whatever is inside that tag. So you select the text you want to apply the inline style. For example, you go to the Properties panel, and then you select CSS, Edit Rule, New Inline Style. So it shows you exactly how you would do this here. So internal styles are similar to an external style sheet, except they are saved inside your page and they are saved as style. So you can have an external style sheet, and you can also have internal style sheet in the same site. So an internal style sheet should be used when a single document has a unique style. So in other words, if you have a page that has a unique style, you might want to utilize an internal style. So you can define internal styles in the head section of the HTML page inside the style tag. You will actually see this when you go to your site. If you create internal styles, you will see them at the top of your page. So you create an internal style by selecting Define in Page and CSS Designer. So you actually can see it here. So when you select Define in Page, and you will see the styles are here, and you will see this at the top of your site. So let's go to and talk about some of the different types of styles. So there are four CSS rule selector types. The first one is tag. The next one is class selector. The next one is compound, and the last one is ID selector. So we're going to go through each one of these. As it says here, the tag, it redefines an HTML element. So when you redefine an HTML element, pre-existing HTML tags, an example could be H1, could be paragraph, or whatever you want to redefine. Every time the tag is used and you set it, for example, if I have H2, and every time I select my text and make it H2, it will define the style. So some things that you can define in the style are background color. You can define your images. You can define your font size, color of all your text. You can choose the body tag, font size, paragraph. You can choose the P tag, bullet styles, including specifying a different image as a bullet. There's a lot of different things that you can use the tag for inside your files. So in this example, I chose H1, H2, and I selected a color, a font family, and a font weight. So you can see here that I selected main, and I selected H1 and H2. So this is in the project that I did for you guys, the 7-step project. You really need to go through and do that before you start working on your file. And I selected H1, H2, and I defined the color, I defined the font style, and the font weight. Then you go ahead and you select the text, so you just have to highlight the text, and I had showed you this in the previous video, and highlight the text, and then select H2. Make sure you have HTML selected in the properties panel. So you just check HTML in the properties panel, and you select format, and then you select H2, and all your headings will take on, right here, writing the cable, will take on the existing styles that you had chose for your tag. Now the next one is a pretty cool one. I like class styles. Class styles allow you to do a lot of different things in your file. So a class style is a little more specific. You can actually make up any kind of name for a class style. It doesn't have to be any specific name. You can name it anything you want. It's a very versatile element on your page. So class styles could be used anywhere in an HTML tag. So these are custom styles that only apply to when you manually select it. So when you manually highlight whatever you want, your text, your object, or whatever you want, then you can apply the class style. So this is different than the tag style, which applies automatically every time the tag is used. You have to actually apply this class. You apply the class style to the element, and it doesn't automatically take on the style like it does with the HTML tag. Class styles only take on the effect that you specifically apply to them, unlike the redefined HTML tag. So you have to specify what you want to take on the class style. So here's a class style that I made, and remember it always has a dot in front of it, and I just chose round. So I just created a style for round, and then I applied it to an element. So I applied it to the caption. So you create your style, you save it in your external style sheet, internal style sheet, or start a new style sheet, depends on what you want to do. And you select your text or image from the properties panel. As you can see here, you select class right here, and you select your element, and you place on the class style. So you can use it over and over again in your file. So this one happens to be a caption. So compound selectors are more specific. So compound combines more than one selector, and when you're defining a style. So these styles are even more specific than a class style. So it helps to change how the links on your page look. So you can make a compound style. You select the text or element on your page that you want to have the style, and you apply the style to be more specific to this element. So right here, you have sidebar image, P image, and I applied a style to it. And it's a new compound style, so only the images in the header will be affected by this new style. The compound styles allow you to create styles that are very specific to certain parts of the page. So the last one is ID selectors. These are unique on a page and can only be used once on a page. So you cannot apply an ID selector to more than one element. It's not very versatile. So it is good for your header, your footer, your container. It's good for the building blocks of the page. The things that you're only going to use once on a page. So with an ID style, you will place this little symbol in front of it, the pound sign in front of it. So here's an example of some ID selectors that I have, and I used it for the wrapper. I used it for hero, the article, hero H2 because I just wanted that one to be specific. The hero image. So there's certain things that I used it for that I wanted to create as a ID selector. So again, we'll go over and you have the simple selector, which is the H1, and this corresponds to HTML tag. You have the ID selector, corresponds to elements ID attribute value, can be used only once per web page. That doesn't mean you can't use it again on another page, but you can only use it once on a page. And then you have a class selector, which can be, also could be a compound. So it corresponds to an element's class attribute that it can be used multiple times on a page. So a class selector has the little dot in front of it, and ID selector has the pound sign. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the CSS box model. Like I said, CSS steps between HTML and the browser, and it helps to redefine how each element is going to be rendered on your page. So what it does is actually imposes an imaginary box around each element and enables you to format almost every aspect of how that box and its contents are displayed. So you can use this for formatting your text. So you can apply CSS formatting in 3 ways. You can specify the fonts, the margins, the pattern, etc. So the padding space adds space to the inside of the box. The margin adds space to the outside of the box. So it's kind of something that you need to think about when you are working with CSS styles. So you have your top margin, your bottom margin, your right margin, your left margin. And then you have, this is your imaginary text. You make believe that this is your text. This is your H1. You can put padding, top padding, right padding, bottom padding, left padding. So you can actually even design this. If you place your text and you want to actually place you want to put a box around it, you can round the edges. You can do so much with your file by using cascading style sheets. So we'll talk a little bit about positioning. So CSS, let me just fix this for a minute here. So CSS, the W3 school, it states that the CSS positioning property allows you to position an element. It also places an element behind another and specifies what should happen when an element's content is too big. So elements can be positioned using the top, bottom, left, and right properties, as I just went through and explained. However, these properties will not work unless the position property is set first. They also work differently depending on the positioning method. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the methods. So we have the static positioning. So HTML elements are positioned static by default. So a static position element is always positioned according to the normal flow of the page. So static position elements are not affected by the top, bottom, left, and right properties. If you don't apply a top, bottom, left property, then it goes by default, and it will be a static positioning. So you also have a fixed position. An element with fixed position is positioned relative to the browser's window. It would not move even if the window is scrolled. And then you have relative positioning. The position element is positioned relative to its normal position. The content or relatively positioned elements can be moved and overlapped on other elements, but the reserved space for the element is still preserved in the normal flow. Then you have absolute positioning. Now you can attribute to any of these to your file. An absolute position element is positioned relative to the first parent element that has a position other than static. If no such element found, the containing block is HTML. So you have inherit this property from its parent element. So some things that you may want to create as you're working with your file is what is called floating boxes. So a box can be set to float, so this might help to position your images on the page. Content that sticks to one side or the other side of its containing elements. So the value for float can be left, right, none, and inherit. So you apply your elements to align them. You apply to your elements to align them on your page. So this will be a class style. So you would make a dot float right and a dot float left. You may want to create these to work in your project and make it a little easier to keep your images aligned where you want them. So the float options are in the box category. So you select right for right float, obviously. Give margins on the left side and bottom to accommodate for text and margins. So you have to think about space in your file as you're working with your file. You don't want your text on top of your images. You're going to be professional designers, so that's why you need to learn how to create divs and how to create using cascading style sheets. And you want your page to look nice and neat. You want your text to look neat. You want to have some line space in between your body copy. You want to have nice space in between your elements. You don't want to have big gaping white spaces on your site. Remember that everything it needs to be relevant. You need to apply principles of design. I'm actually going to go through some of this too in this class. So you select left to create a float to float your images to the left. So you give a margin on the right side and bottom to accommodate text and margin. So you select the image and apply it the class. So here's an example of float left and how you may want to set this up. So if I did float left, then I put 10 pixels on the right side. Okay, and I float it, I put it down here and I float it to the left. So I actually keep everything in auto, and the padding I just kept at 0. So you can play around with this. You can put, if you want to put some pixels down the bottom, you can. It's totally up to you, and it depends upon what you are using the float left for. So there are a lot of rules, cascading style rules, because it really depends upon how you set your file up. And if you use, inline styles, if you use external style sheets, it really is relevant. So a cascading format and instruction is called a rule. So a rule consists of 2 parts, the selector and 1 or more declaration. So you have 2 parts. If you can see here, here's an example right here just for the P tag. You have your declaration here and a declaration here. So you have 2 parts for the CSS rule construction. So the selector identifies what element or a combination of elements are going to be formatted, which is the very simple thing to understand. And the declaration contains the formatting specification. So, if I have the P element here, the HTML element here, and I state that I want to have the color red, and I want the font family to be Veranda. So this is pretty easy to do in Dreamweaver using the cascading style sheet file. It's very easy to set everything up. You can do this very quickly and easily in this program. So if you want to have two of them, multiple, then you can apply, if there's font weight, padding, you can apply it to 2 more 1. So it just can define any HTML element as well as define 2 custom selector modifiers, class and ID. So cascading formatting in 3 ways. Inline uses, this is just a review, inline uses the style attribute HTML elements. Embedded in an internal style sheet uses the style. So internal uses the style element in the head section, and external style sheet attached to an external style or create directly in Dreamweaver to link to all the pages in your site. So number 5, 4 cascading style rules. So the first one is the cascade theory. I don't know if you've gone through any of these before. I don't know if they're in this book or not, but they were in the previous book. So number 1, the cascade theory. So this describes the order and placement of rules in the style sheet or on a page and affects the application of styling. If 2 rules conflict, so we have to decide which one wins out. That's why you have to be very careful when you're working with your file. Especially as a new designer, you end up having many rules in your site. If you have more than 1 rule in your site, you're going to have lots of complication. So, for example, both the following rules change the color of H1, but which one is going to be honored? So you have H1 in color blue, H1 color red. So the answer is red. Why is that? The second rule wins because it is the last rule declared, or the closest one to the actual content. So when you try to determine which CSS rule will be honored, the browser typically will use the following order hierarchy, with 4 being the highest. So this is just one, okay? So browser defaults. So we have external style sheets. So we have external style sheets, internal style sheets in the head section, and inline styles inside the HTML element. So we have the inheritance theory. Describes how one rule can be affected by 1 or more previously declared rules. So let's take a look at this. So we have H1 in color blue. H1 is font family veranda. Some rules will play nicely together. Note that H1 rule sticks since the second rule does not contradict or reset the color attribute. So both rules will be honored. So they both are rules for H1. One is for the color and one is for the font. So let's just take a look at these rules. Let me just fix this as I go along because it's got off a little bit. So H1 is color is blue, font family veranda. And then we have div H1, color is red. So this is an example of what they look like. Notice the H1 element is contained or nested with a div element will inherit the veranda font but be displayed in red. So we have 2 different elements, but because one, the HTML element is contained or nested, and the div element will inherit the veranda font. So we have to be very careful when we're doing this to make sure that we set everything correctly. So now we have the descendant theory. It describes how formatting can target a particular element based on its position in relationship to other elements. By building a selector of multiple elements such as an ID and class attribute, you can target the formatting to specific instances of text within your website. So we have these 3 rules: H1, font family, veranda, color blue, div H1, font family, impact, color red. We have a lot of different fonts in this, don't we? Div product H1, font family, times, color green. So as you can see, I'm an H1 inside a div, so I'm red and impact. H1 inside a div formatted with a class product, so I am green in times. So we have the specific theory. Describes how browsers determine what formatting to apply when two or more rules conflict. So this is something to think about. So with reference to this is weight, giving certain rules more weight based on proximity, inheritance, and descendant relationships. So we have these three rules here. H1 font family for under color, div H1 font family times color red, div guess H1 font family impact so color green. So which one is going to be displayed? So the color orange is an inline style. So like I said before, you have to be really careful about inline styles because inline styles will trump everything. So if you wanted to, you go ahead and you make a class style and you try to place an external style sheet on, and you've already created an inline style, it will not recognize your class style, and it will not recognize your external style because you have already stated inside your file in inline style that you want this color to be orange. So remember, the ID is designated with a pound sign, can only be used once. So this is it for this lecture. I know there's a lot to learn, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of basics, a little bit of understanding before you actually start working with the style sheets. So next class we'll be talking about creating your navigational bar.